talk about what a career fair is. So for those of you who don't know what a career fair is and are interested in attending one for the first time, or for those of you who want to brush up your skills, or we haven't had an in-person career fair in a long time. So some of you may be new to that as well. We'll talk about how to prepare logistically with resumes, questions to ask employers, things like that. And then we will talk about just kind of the nuts and bolts of the day. So what the location is, what you can expect. Is there going to be water to drink? Yes, there will be. Restrooms, things like that. And feel free to ask questions about any of those topics. There is a Q&A function in your Zoom bar. And this might look a little bit different for those of you who have done Zoom classes before. Sometimes that doesn't show up, but because this is a webinar format, you should see a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you can use that to ask questions. All right. So the basics. When is it? In the upper right, you can see it's February 24th, 2023 from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. This is a Friday, and very likely if you all made it to this webinar, you know when it is, so I won't talk too much about that. And then who will be there? We have about 200 organizations registered already from all different employment sectors, and they'll be recruiting for hundreds of different jobs, internships, and other employment opportunities. Just so you know, all students who have either attended the University of Minnesota in the past 3 years and current students are able to attend. And so represented, you'll have folks from the Twin Cities campus, Crookston, Moorhead, Morris, Rochester. Sorry if I missed any, but we'll have folks from all over the state attending. This is actually the largest career fair in the state as well. So it's a really great opportunity to network for both employers and students and recent graduates. And we'll talk a little bit more later about what you can expect. I'll also talk more about where it is, but just so you can write it down if you're doing that, it will be in 2 different locations this year on the Twin Cities campus, in Huntington Bank Stadium and McNamara Alumni Center. All right, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so what is a career fair and how can you make the most of it? Some common misconceptions or sort of myths about career fairs is that you attend the job fair and you'll leave with a job in hand like that same day, or that you will apply for the job on site that day, or that maybe only juniors and seniors should attend and freshmen won't really get anything out of it. Those are all myths, and we'll talk a little bit about why. So career fairs are actually more about building relationships, not necessarily leaving with a job that same day. You might, get a lead for a job and you might get more information about applying to a specific job, but really you're there to build relationships. Kind of a fun fact is that 80% of people find jobs via networking, which is like way more than you see just like applying randomly online to positions you find. So 80% of people find jobs networking. So this is a great opportunity. Something else to know is that some employers do accept resumes in person, and actually we will recommend that you bring resumes to the career fair, but some will tell you just go apply online. And that doesn't mean that they're not interested in you. That just means they have an online application. But again, it's still important to have a resume copy with you that you can hand to employers. So what does a career fair look like? Marguerite is showing some wonderful photos here, but a career fair is an event where employers have booths with information and representatives from the organization that are available to talk with you. Again, the goal of the event is to build relationships or network with employers so that you can explore different career fields, discover different position openings, and engage with employers about their organizations and what kinds of skills they're seeking for their roles. So again, you might not leave with a job offer in hand, but you will leave with a better understanding of where you want to apply for positions or what career fields you want to explore, gain experience representing yourself to employers and having conversations with employers. And you'll learn a little bit about who to get in touch with to learn more or ask questions to if you're interested in a specific organization. And here are some, okay, this photo we'll just point out, you can see there's lots of people in line for this particular employer. So that's something to just know going into a career fair, is that some employers like Target, for example, are pretty popular. And so you will see people forming a line to talk with employers. And that's totally understandable and expected. Just be patient. And then you may notice that recruiters are moving a little bit more quickly in those lines. So try not to take that personally, and be respectful of other students that are hoping to talk with the reps. I'll also point out that you can see a lot of people in, sorry, Marguerite, thank you. A lot of people in this particular picture are wearing suits, and you can do that. And we'll talk a little bit more later about how to dress. But you should know that certainly not everyone will be wearing suits or dressed up this much. So there's a range of how you can dress and present yourself. Anything you'd add, Marguerite?
No, I think that about sums it up.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so then I'm going to put a link in the chat to register on Handshake. So this link should take you to the University of Minnesota Job and Internship Fair Handshake page. We recommend that you join the event, as you can see circled in pink there. I don't know what happens when you favorite, but we recommend that you register for the event. That will allow you to receive important email updates that we'll send out about logistics and career fair prep tips. And especially for those of you who are traveling from far distances to attend the career fair, it will have some transportation information available to you from your specific career services center. So for those of you who are going to need to bus from like Crookston, for example, it's really important that you especially are registering for this event to make sure you get important transportation information. When you register on Handshake, we recommend that you upload your resume, update your profile, including a picture if you're comfortable, and then check your privacy settings to be viewable to employers. And we highly encourage, again, that you update your profile because we see, sorry, can you go back? Go back one more. Thank you. You can, you'll notice that employers are more likely to reach out to you if you have an updated profile. So we just recommend that. And again, the registration link is in the chat. And actually, I see that I just sent it to Marguerite. So now it's in the chat. Okay, now you can go to the next one. Okay, so here you'll see circled all employers. So no surprise there. This, if you click on that on Handshake, you'll be able to see the employers that are registered. We're still about a month out from the career fair, so you'll see that number climb and climb as more employers are registering. But good to know that that's where you find the list of employers that will be there, so you can make a list on your own of who you'd like to connect with. And think about how many employers you'd like to talk to. We recommend starting with around 5 or 10. Maybe don't plan to do more than that because it can be really overwhelming to have that many conversations. But you know yourself, and if you like to talk to lots of different people, go for it. But aim for around 5. And then kind of a hot tip that we like to recommend for students is to start with employers that are towards the bottom of your list, maybe the ones that you're like just kind of curious about. To practice introducing yourself and sort of get those nerves out so that by the time you get to your number 1 employer, you're feeling really confident and ready to talk about yourself. Okay, you can go to the next one. All right, this is called an industry sheet. And really all it is, this is just a sample one, and you'll see the updated ones on Handshake prior to the event. They are not currently up yet because, like I said, we are still adding employers to our list of registered folks. So it will probably be up about a week before the event. But what you can see is, for example, this industry sheet is for food, agriculture, environment, and natural resources industries. and companies. And so we have someone who's compiling a list of all the employers that might fall under like animal and wildlife, for example. So that way, if you know, okay, I'm interested in animal and wildlife internships and jobs, you can see a list of the organizations that fall into that category. And then you can see, we'll check whether they're hiring for jobs, internships, and if they're hiring international students. And the caveat for the hiring international students box is really that they have expressed to us actively that they are hiring international students. That does not mean that they won't hire international students. So I encourage you to still ask them and talk to them. And we have a slide about that later as well for international students. But these are just the employers that have expressed that they know they will hire international students. All right, you can go to the next one. Okay, download the Handshake app. So for those of you who have smartphones, the Handshake app exists on both the Apple App Store and Google Play. And you can just search for Handshake and download it. And the reason you would do that is because, especially with 2 different locations, the app will be really helpful to tell you which employers are in which building. So you can actually look ahead of time to see where employers are going to be and favorite them so that you can keep track of them day of and whip out your phone and see where you're headed to next. The other thing I'll say about that, though, is don't panic too much if you're having trouble keeping track of where employers are. We'll have tons of staff on site to help you navigate and find employers you're looking for. All right. Okay, and this kind of relates to something I was talking about earlier, but the career search is not a one-way street. So make sure that you're updating your profile. Make sure that if someone were to visit your Handshake profile, they would know a human was behind it. We see that students with a full profile are 5 times as likely to be messaged by employers. So make sure that you at least start uploading your resume. Right.
And speaking of resumes, so we're going to talk a little bit more about what a resume is, what makes it the strongest it can possibly be, and why you might want to bring one to a job fair. So it can seem a little bit like counterintuitive, right? You're bringing like a piece of paper to the job fair, right? But there's a couple reasons why we recommend it. Resumes are a quick way to give some context about you and your background and why you might be interested in a particular company or employer. They can also be a reinforcement for you in case you're not sure what to talk about. If you're having a conversation, you're like, oh, wait, why am I here again? My brain just froze. Take a look at that resume, see what those experiences are that you wanted to hit on, and there you go. The resume is your opportunity to give a strong first impression, and having a great one sets you apart from the crowd and gives the employer something to remember you by. So what should be on my resume? So like we said, the resume is the quick overview of who you are and what you've done in the past that brings you here today. So you're going to want to touch on a mix of these sections that we have on the screen to reflect all the amazing experience you've had. At the top of the document, this is optional. Some folks opt to do this, but especially for an event, this can be helpful. You might want to include an objective/summary section. It's often not on other resumes. You might not see other people recommending it, but it can be helpful at a career fair to give a quick overview of who you are, since they only have a few seconds to take a look. Education is always going to be one of the first things at the top of your resume. This gives them a little bit about your educational background, when you're getting your degree, all of that good stuff. Experience is what I like to think of as like the meat of the sandwich. So this is going to be probably under your education section. And in that, you've got work experiences, volunteer experiences, projects that you've done, research opportunities, all of that good stuff. There's a wide variety of different kinds of experiences. As long as you're including one of these sections, maybe even 2, depending on what kinds of experience you've had, that's great. Other optional sections include a skills section at the bottom of your resume that typically talks about languages you speak, computer programs you're familiar with, other stuff like that. Awards and honors can also be helpful if you've had a lot of academic awards or scholarships that you want to talk about. So a mix of these sections is usually your golden ticket. Got like two different, there we go. Give me just 1 second. Great. Okay, so we've got a great example of a resume thanks to our friend Beyonce. Thank you, Beyonce. So as you can see, Beyonce's included a mix of a couple of these different sections, right? She's got her education at the top, relevant work experience, additional extracurricular experience, and a skills section down at the bottom. You'll also notice that her format is very clean and readable. It's very simple. It lets the content shine through. Perfect. Well done, Beyonce. The other thing that she's doing that I want to highlight is what we call these description statements, which are these bullet points for each experience. This is what helps fill in the employer about what you did in a past experience and how you contributed to the workplace. So as you'll see on the slide, we have 3 main things that we want you to think about as you're building these bullet points. Start with a good, strong action verb, include some details about the task you're describing, and finish off with an outcome or a desired goal. What were you working towards, right? So let's see one of Beyonce's examples. Thank you, Beyonce. Thank you, Queen Bee. So under the Minnesota Daily, she's got communicate with employers and ad posting clients to create and execute advertisements on time. Again, good, strong verb, some detail about what she was doing, and then to create advertisements on time. Perfect example. So now that Beyonce's got all the great content on her resume, the next thing that she's going to do is have it reviewed at her career services office. This information is usually readily available online for your college. Just give it a quick Google search. And once she's got it reviewed and she's super confident in the content, she's taken all of the notes from whoever she had it reviewed by. Now she's ready to go to the job fair with some copies of her resume in hand. We usually recommend bringing about 10. Seems like a lot, but it helps you communicate effectively. It makes sure that you have enough for any situation, and it clearly shows that you put in the effort to be there today. Great. A couple more tips for resumes. Number 1, limiting to 1 page is a big one. So there are some situations in which maybe 2 pages is okay for a resume, especially for undergrad job fairs. 1 page is going to be your best bet. Again, it's a first impression document when you're talking to hiring managers. So just handing them 1 page is much better. Number 2, check for typos. They're always there. Even when you don't think they are, they're hiding from you. So make sure that not only you're checking for typos, but whoever is reviewing your resume is checking, and go ahead and run it by other people as well to have them grammar check for you. And number 3, keep formatting simple. So like our example on the last side, 1 column, no colors, keeping it very simple so that the content can shine through. Making it like a pretty aesthetic is nowhere near as important here. Make sure that we know the content first and foremost. Okay, so once you've got your resume ready to go and you start talking to an employer, one of the big questions is, how am I going to initiate this conversation? How do I introduce myself? So the way that you're going to do that at a job fair is what we typically refer to as an elevator pitch. And so it's usually about 30 seconds, maybe up to 1 minute, where you give the employer a quick overview of the following things. Name, pronouns if you're comfortable, a little bit about your education experience, where you're at in school and where you're at with your degree progress. Brief summary of skills or experiences that you've had, what you're looking for and why you're interested in that company, and a couple of questions that you have for the employer. All of these things demonstrate that you are ready to be there today and you really want to engage with the employer. So here's a quick example from our friend Goldie the Gopher. As you'll see, starting off with name, giving some information about where they're at in their education, a little bit about their past experiences that have brought them to that particular employer, what they would like to do with that employer, and finally finishing off with a question. Can you tell me more about your internship program? This is a really helpful tip because what that does is it puts the burden of conversation off of you. If you're able to end your elevator pitch with a question that goes back to the hiring manager, then number 1, you don't have to talk anymore and you can take a breath. But also, you're starting that dialogue with the hiring manager and you'll be able to have a real conversation at that point. And here's a slightly longer example from our friend Pounce. Again, Pounce is giving us all the major information that we need to know about them. educational stuff, where they're at with their degree, a little bit about the skills that they're interested in expanding on at that company and organization, customer service roles, talking about past experiences, and of course, finishing with that question. So this is a little bit more of an elaborate explanation, but it still gets the job done. It gives a clear understanding of why you're there. You understand what you bring to the table, and you're able to start a conversation with the employer.
Okay, thank you, Marguerite. I really appreciate that. So the next step, or the next part of your conversation with an employer after you give them your resume, you introduce yourself, is you'll want to have some questions prepared to talk to the employers about. And it can be really awkward if you don't take the time to prepare these questions. Speaking from personal experience, you get so excited to introduce yourself, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I said all of the things I practiced. So really important to kind of go the next step and prepare at least one question. Like Marguerite mentioned, ending on a question is a great way to get the conversation to keep going. So here are some of the example questions that we put together. These are really general, and really we recommend trying to be as specific as possible when you're preparing questions for different organizations, because that shows that you've put in effort doing some research about the organization. But I'll read some of these aloud. So the first one in red there is, or maroon, excuse me, is I saw on Handshake or another job site, if they use a different job site, that you're looking for this position. Can you tell me a little bit more about this opportunity? That's a good safe bet to have in your back pocket if you're feeling a little nervous. It's a good one to fall back on. Another one, this is an example for someone who maybe is early on in their academic journey. I'm a first-year student. Do you have any recommendations of what kinds of experiences I can seek out now to help prepare for an internship later on? Something like that, to just kind of let them know your positionality and what you're interested in learning about. This yellow one here says, I saw on your website that your organization really values, I can't think of an example, creativity. Can you share an example of how you've seen this value in action recently at your organization? I love that question because it shows something really specific that you looked up about their organization, that your values align. Because if you're like, I really care about creativity, that shows them that there's some alignment there, and you get to learn a lot about their organization. And then this one's really general, the one at the bottom here. May I follow up with you after the fair? If so, how do you prefer to be contacted? And a little tip, if you're going to ask that question, which I really recommend ending every conversation with, that is make a note, write it down. Don't just ask them and be like, oh yeah, I'll remember. You're probably going to have a lot of adrenaline, feel a little nervous. So if they have a business card, get it. And if not, write down what their LinkedIn handle is, or whatever way they prefer to be contacted, and make sure that you keep track of it. So one other thing I like to point out with preparing questions is also give the employer a chance to respond to the questions that you're asking. It can also be really easy to just like rattle off the things that you've prepared. Totally understandable. And again, these are recruiters, and so they're really used to working with people who are entering the career fields they work in. So that's okay, but try to give them a chance to share a response and really listen to it, so that you can then ask more related questions, or the rest of your questions, even if they're not related to what the employer just shared, but kind of show that you're actively listening, and it'll make you get more out of the experience as well. All right. What to wear? I'm sure this is on everyone's mind. It would be on my mind. So like I mentioned earlier, some folks will be wearing suits to the fair, but that certainly will not be everyone. And honestly, it may not even be the majority. I'm going to share a Pinterest board here that gives some examples of different ways that you may choose to express yourself at the fair. But really, these are, again, just suggestions, and our guideline is to dress in a way that is authentic to you, that feels comfortable, and showcases how you would like to be viewed in a workplace setting. And that might be different from how your friend wants to be viewed. That might be different from how Marguerite or I would want to be viewed in a workplace setting. So think about what feels true to you. If you're not feeling comfortable in what you're wearing as you're talking to employers and recruiters about what you're interested in and passionate in, you probably won't seem like you're comfortable. So we really encourage you. There's so many different ways to be professional, and the world is really expanding in that way, which is great. So be sure to dress in a way that feels good to you. If you are looking for more guidelines, we recommend looking up business casual. That can give you some ideas. We tend to not recommend wearing distressed jeans, hoodies or sweatshirts, wearing beanies, or like it'll be winter, for example. We recommend taking like your winter hat off when you come in. Try not to wear baseball caps, things like that. Totally fine to showcase your personality though. Wear colors, wear patterns, do a power clash, whatever you want. But be sure that it feels true to you and that you're not kind of doing it just for a show, I would say. And again, suits are not required. All right. Here's some more examples of what students have worn in the past. I think this is from this year's CLA Career and Internship Fair. So this is a current example. You can see some people again are wearing suits, but I see like a nice quarter zip. Someone's wearing like a nice blouse. The person on the far right is an employer, and that's a great person to kind of look to see like what they're wearing. I see that this employer is wearing like dark jeans. So there's a wide variety here. All right. Just some more examples. This can give you an idea of what the fair looks like as well. These photos were taken in Huntington Bank Stadium. You can go to the next one. Oh, and that was supposed to get deleted. Sorry, you can go to the next one. All right, so here's some information for international students. And this information, a lot of it is on the website that is shared in that upper corner. And here, I'll put it in the chat again. So don't feel like you have to remember all of this information right now. But just so you know, for international students, your internship or job must be in the area of the major that you are intending to declare or have declared. And some of you might know that already. And if you're early on in your academic career, you may not, and that's okay too. You don't need to be an expert in knowing about CPT or OPT, but you should have some comfort level. But we also will have representatives from International Student and Scholar Services, which is a Twin Cities resource. But I'm sure you all have similar ones on your campuses. If you have specific questions about how to talk about CPT or OPT, including like how long can you work for an organization, how many hours a week could you work for an organization, things like that. Something to remember is that American employers really are often ignorant to these rules, and they probably just don't know. So it does not mean that they do not want to hire international students. They just aren't aware of what the rules are. So we will have some folks on site to help you articulate what CPT and OPT are, if that's helpful to you. Large employers will have rules about whether they will hire international students, and they will tell you that right away. And that's because they usually have more developed like lawyers and HR programs and things like that. So they are aware of that. But small companies generally don't know and are open to being convinced. So you can kind of do a little bit more with your elevator pitch there too, just as any student would. You may want to be thinking about what your specific competitive advantage is. And that honestly can be partly your international student identity and thinking about all of the knowledge and adaptability that you have already showcased and merely being a student at the University of Minnesota, but it can be other things as well. So don't limit yourself to only talking about being an international student, but know that that is a competitive edge as well. All right. What to bring? So this is a pretty visual slide. So for those of you who can see this slide, we have an image of a resume on the far left, and Marguerite did a wonderful job talking about that. So we recommend bringing about 10 copies of your resume. Please note that we will not have printing services on site. So you'll want to print at your library or your career services ahead of time. So at least 10 copies, you can bring more. Then you'll want something to write with. This can be to take notes as you're talking with employers, writing down contact information. It can be jogging notes so that you know what to talk about if you're feeling a little bit nervous. And I encourage folks to feel comfortable bringing notes. I think sometimes that gets a bad reputation because people think it means that folks won't think that you're prepared. But really employers will see that as like, oh, wow, they really did their research and they care enough that they've written some things down. Certainly you want to kind of use rules like you would if you were presenting information, right? And not just talk off of the notes that you've written, but that's okay to bring. Then maybe something to write on. So we have a picture of a pad folio. You don't need to have something as fancy as that. You can just use paper or a notebook that you have, whatever's useful to you. The little word bubble is supposed to be your questions to ask employers and any notes you have about your self-introduction or elevator pitch. And then we have a happy face. So you do not have to smile the entire time you're at the fair. Present however you like. If you're not a smiley person, you do not need to do that. But bring an open mind. We encourage you to see what you can get out of this experience and make connections while you're there. Okay, here's some logistics. And again, this will all be on the candidate information page for the University of Minnesota Job and Internship Fair. And I think, yes, that's the most recent link that I sent. So you'll be able to find this there and on the Handshake page. So to check in, you will need your student ID, or you can use your student ID number if you don't have a physical card. So you'll either swipe in or let the folks know who are operating the welcome table what your ID number is, and then you'll be given a name tag. And this name tag is extra special because if you keep it, you're able to go from one location to the other without having to check in again. So it's okay if you lose it in between places, but you'll just have to check in again, which is all right. When you get there and you check in, there will be an orientation video that you'll watch probably with a group of students who are all checking in. So you'll kind of see people doing this. It'll be on your smartphone, or there will be opportunities to use other devices. If you do not have a smartphone, that's totally fine. This orientation video will give you a quick overview of some of the day of fair things that you'll want to know. So where do I go? How do I know where employers are? Things like that. It's just a quick overview. So if you have more questions, that's totally fine. Again, there's going to be tons of staff around. There will be people from all different career services from all of the different campuses. So you'll see some friendly faces and you can ask lots of questions. It's in February, which means that you will probably want to wear a coat. Please wear a coat. We will have a free coat check available on site. And so after you check in, you'll be able to give your coat to our coat check facility, and they will tag it for you at no cost and keep track of it for you. So you can dress warm and then feel comfortable inside as well and not have to carry a bulky jacket or scarf around or whatever it is. There will be water stations available. So you can bring your own water bottle, certainly, but there will be cups and water around if you need it. There will not be food available. So make sure that if you're planning on staying a while, you're taking care of yourself and being sure to eat some snacks or take breaks or whatever helps you. There will be bathrooms at both locations. There will be single stall bathrooms as well as gendered bathrooms with multiple stalls at both locations. And if you need help finding those, I would guess there's going to be signs, but there will also be lots of staff again that can tell you. There will be areas to take breaks in both locations. So we call these student lounges, and you can find signs pointing to those in each location. And these are areas where career coaches and some peer coaches possibly will be staffing to help you relax, talk through an interaction you just had with an employer. You probably don't want to get your resume reviewed last minute because you can't really make any changes, but they can affirm that you're on the right track with your resume. And the main thing I see students using these areas for is to decompress and like text someone, and also to run through your elevator pitch with a career coach. So this is a great time to get that last minute feedback on your self-introduction or elevator pitch before you talk to employers. Okay, and then another fun thing is that there will be headshots, free LinkedIn headshots, woo, offered in Huntington Banks Stadium. I would guess that will be very easy to find because it will be very popular, but there will be signage as well to help you find out where to get headshots. One thing to know about that is we do expect long lines because it's free headshots, everyone wants one. And so just make sure that you're prioritizing what's most important to you. If you have like one more employer you're hoping to talk to and it's 3:30, you may have to choose one or the other or get there early. So speaking of which, the fair runs from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., which seems like a really long time, but it can go pretty quickly if you're factoring in traveling from building to building, from table to table, and taking breaks because you're a human. So we just recommend that you're planning your time well. And that goes back to doing your research and thinking through which employers you want to be sure to visit. Okay, and then finally, your transportation information. You can find some transportation information on that most recent link that I put in the chat if you scroll to the bottom. But more specific and accurate information will be sent out, like I said, once you register on Handshake for the event. So for folks who are traveling from campuses that are not the Twin Cities campus, once you register for the career fair, you'll get an email, and then you'll be able to refer to that registration confirmation for your transportation details. If you do have any questions about how you're getting to the fair, and it's not on the website, we encourage you to reach out to your specific college's career services, and they'll be able to connect you to more information. All right. Oh, I just put pictures. So this is what the stadium looks like. It's not going to look like this because it's February, but Huntington Banks Stadium is that big stadium. And Marguerite, could you I don't know if your mouse will show up, but if you gesture, oh, sorry.
What did I do? Oh, okay.
No, that's my bad. If you gesture to like the brown area where the Club Cambria is, sorry, yeah, up there, that's where the career fair takes place. So I don't know, when I first started, I was like, oh my gosh, is it like on the football field? No, it's in these, like, they sort of just look like an event space on the outer part of the stadium. You will be inside and warm and it'll be good. And then, yes, the yellow arrow is pointing to where McNamara Alumni Center is. So it's just across the street. And there will also be people directing you where to go for that as well. So don't worry too much. Okay. So finally, 3 steps that you can prepare tonight to feel really good. Because I know that was a lot of information. So if you're looking for just like some chunked out information of what you can do, here we go. First, identify 3 to 5 or more, but at least 3 to 5 employers and organizations that you want to connect with at the fair. Again, you can find all of the employers on Handshake, but if you're looking to see employers based on what industry they work in, you will have to wait a couple weeks still for that information to kind of be parsed out for you, but you can start doing that on your own as well. Number 2, prepare your self-introduction and at least 2 questions for each employer. So we went over some example questions to ask. You can do some research on your own too. I know there's lots of career blogs out there. You can talk to your career services to come up with some good questions and practice your self-introduction. And really, really, I recommend practicing your self-introduction like out loud to a mirror, to your cat or dog, to a friend. Because it sounds really different once you're actually saying it. And sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, what am I interested in? So you may want to take some notes and make sure you practice. And then finally, update your resume if you haven't already, or create a resume if you haven't already, and then print as many copies as you would like. And again, we recommend bringing about 10 copies. Okay, so that's it. We'll see you on Friday, February 24th, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And if you have questions, now's a great time to put them in the Q&A, and I will slowly get through them. I see that we do have a few already. So one question is there a way to find employers based on our major on the University of Minnesota career webpage or on Handshake? Great question. So you will not see employers based on major, and that's for several different reasons. But the most important one is that employers typically aren't looking for just one major or aren't looking for students that have specific majors, which is actually great because that would be really difficult if you were like, I'm a psychology major, but I'm really interested in this agriculture company, but they're not even considering me. So you won't usually see that happen, which is good. More likely, you'll see that employers are looking for applicants based on their skills and competencies, which you can articulate on your resume, no matter what major that you have. What would be probably the most helpful resource for the person that asked this question is those industry sheets. Again, I know it's a little frustrating to have to wait for them right now, but really it's so that they are as complete as possible since employers are still getting added. Okay, the next question, where in Huntington will the headshots be? I believe they're getting set up in sort of I don't know the name of the room because I haven't been to this room, honestly, but they're being set up in a room on the floor that the employers are on. And so you'll see lots of traffic, like student traffic and staff traffic. You'll see signs. And if you are still having trouble finding it, you can totally ask a staff member that is on site. But we just wanted to at least give you the building name. So don't be looking for headshots in McNamara. They're not in both locations. They're just in Huntington Bank Stadium. Thanks for asking that question. Okay, how long should you talk to an employer? That's a great question. And it really, again, depends. Marguerite, did you have an answer for this one?
I'm trying to think. As far as I'm aware, from the career fairs that I've attended, they can vary widely. It kind of depends on, first of all, like you're going to give an elevator pitch, and there will probably be a couple questions that go back and forth. But depending on what comes out of that conversation organically, you might be with them for just a couple minutes, and you might be there for a little bit longer. In general, I would say, what do we think, Holly? Like 5 minutes or under-ish? Does that seem right? Because there will also be a line for a lot of employers, so they're probably going to want to keep things snappy as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is to kind of pay attention and use context clues of like, are there a ton of people waiting to talk to this employer? Like maybe I shouldn't talk to them for 10 minutes. I think 5 minutes is a good gauge. I would say do whatever feels natural. And if there's no line and you have more questions and the recruiter seems interested too, as long as you're being sensitive to like, if they, need to like leave and use the restroom or whatever, you can really talk to them as long as you both are interested in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Okay. And then, oh, and someone asked for the slides. Yes, I shared the slides in the link in the chat, and you'll see there's presenter notes in there too. So we tried to do it really detailed so you guys can read it as well if you'd like. And again, this webinar will be posted on the UMJF website, which is this one. Okay, there's another question. If I already have a part-time job, do I need to mention it to the employers, or don't even mention it? Marguerite, do you have an answer for this one?
I think that it might be context clues on occasion, but it might also be, Unfortunately, asterisk depends. I think it probably might be helpful, especially in terms of demonstrating, like, oh, here's what I'm doing right now that sort of is pushing me towards your experience. So tell me a little bit about how this might mesh. And you might find that in the course of conversation, it might come up where, oh, by the way, I'm also working for this employer. Maybe it's in the same industry and you know them. Or like, do you foresee that conflicting if I were to have an internship with you? That might come up in conversation. I don't think it's necessarily like a you have to disclose sort of thing. Most employers are not going to be that worried about that. But if it comes up in conversation, it's not a secret. Absolutely go ahead and share and see if you can tie it back to what brings you to that employer and the skills that you're getting from that. What do you think, Holly?
I love that answer, especially that last part of thinking about like it really is an asset to them if you have work experience. So they would be
Definitely.
excited to hear about what you're working on, would be my guess.
Yeah,
If you're feeling iffy about it though, and you just want to like highlight the skills that you're getting from that job without talking about kind of their origin story, that's totally fine too. You have no obligation to share anything you don't want to with employers ever. You are
absolutely.
totally in charge of what you share.
Yes.
Thanks for asking that question. All right, I'm gonna hold on here and see if there's any more questions. We've answered the ones that were in the chat or in the Q&A. While people are maybe thinking of their last questions, Marguerite, I'm wondering, do you have any sage wisdom to offer as someone who's been to a career fair?
Well, I'm not old enough for sage wisdom, Holly.
Regular wisdom?
We'll try that. We can attempt that. I would say I think the thing that struck me, like when I was a first year going to my first career fair, I think the first thing that struck me is that it is significantly more natural than you think it is. Networking is one of those kind of weird skills that feels like I'm not really sure how to do this. It's social
Mhm.
connection, but it also isn't what am I doing? And it's feels kind of unnatural at first to this is all the stuff I've done. It feels like bragging. But it's not in this context. They want to
No.
know all of the things that you bring to the table. They want to know more about you. And I think once you have those questions, the questions are a big thing. That's something that I did not know when I like first came to university and I was first looking at jobs and internships. Having questions prepared, showing that you've done your research
Mhm.
and being able to start a dialogue with them. So that way you feel like, hey, it's not just that I know hiring manager from X company. I know so and so who has a really cool job at X company and maybe I'd be able to work with them in the future.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. I like what you said about kind of acknowledging that it can feel really awkward to be like bragging about yourself. And I totally understand that too. I think to some extent we'll always feel that way a little bit.
Oh,
But this
definitely.
is one of those contexts where it really is expected.
Mhm.
We had someone ask roughly how much are there in the job fair? And if you don't mind clarifying that question, if you get a chance, if this person is still here, that would be great. But I can try to answer what it might be. So there's going to be over 200 employers at the job fair. And if you're wondering how many students might end up showing up, um, honestly, I've heard that some years there have been like 1,000 at this job fair, maybe more like 500 or 600 this year as employers, thank you for clarifying. As we're kind of getting back on campus, you can expect to see a lot of students as well. And so this person clarified they're wondering how many employers. You can see live as employers are registering on Handshake. That is like the live list of employers that are going to be there. We expect anywhere from, we already have about 200 to, I think it's capped at like 250. So there may be some more joining here too. Thanks for that question. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions right now, but I'll hang on for a little bit here if folks have last thoughts they're putting together. But thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. Oh, I see someone said, can graduate students attend as well? Yes, you can. You are a U of M student, you can come. Or if you've graduated within the last 3 years, you're welcome to join as well. But yes, graduate students can come. Just be sure you have your student ID just like anyone else. Someone asked, can we leave anytime or do we have to wait till the end? Great question. So because this is sort of visiting tables that you're interested in, that means that you can leave whenever you're done visiting the tables that you're interested in. So no one will think that it's odd if you leave before 4 p.m. And no one will think that it's odd if you arrive after 10 a.m. You can come and go as you please and as is useful for you.
Being there for the whole 6 hours would be a bit of an endurance sport, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think people do it, but it would be a long
It's
day.
very impressive.
I would have trouble.
You've got
Yeah.
quite a bit of stamina if you do, but not abnormal.
Yes, true. You can do it. Yeah. Okay. I'm not seeing any more questions right now. So I think I will wrap this up if that sounds okay. Excuse me, I've been talking too much. But thank you so much, Marguerite, for joining me and co-presenting here. I really appreciate it. And for
Thank
those of
you.
you who are CLA students at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, come see Marguerite. She's a peer advisor in our office and she's so lovely and she can review your resume and hear your elevator pitch and all that good stuff. All right. I'm going to stop recording.